3rd, 2025 Kansas Post-Secondary Technical Education Association to order. In your packets, we have minutes from 2 meetings, April 21st and September 11th. Are there any edits, corrections to those?
Curtis here. I would move to approve those minutes.
Moved by Curtis. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mike Bean. Anybody opposed? Hearing none, seeing none, motion approved. Are there any introductions this morning?
I do have one. Mr. Dustin Dick, he is, can you come to the microphone, please? I did ask Vice President White, is this the best time to show the clip? We are so excited, and Mr. Dick can kind of share with you a little bit of what we're doing to help build that business pathway in a very concrete way at Topeka High. But he's principal at Topeka High. He also is the athletic director. He's the principal at TCALC, and he's the lead principal for all of our high schools. We believe in giving someone like 5, 6 jobs if they're going to earn their keep. With him being over secondary, Mr. Dick, can you cue up what they're going to see on that news clip?
So we had a banking and investing class last year with some students and a teacher who the students had some interest in opening a school bank. It's not that uncommon anymore for schools to have a school-run bank and things like that in the school. And I've opened one of those previously at another school where I was principal. So we had some interest in doing that. Space is always an issue at Topeka High. So I was a little hesitant to really want to go down that path because while it's good experience for students, they have a hard time getting. It's not a real account when a kid opens an account usually at a school bank, and they can't take it with them, and it doesn't mean as much. But Invista Credit Union approached us as part of that process and had a conversation, and they had an interest in, they had explored some of these school banks in Texas. There was a school that actually had a branch of the bank. And so when a kid opened an account, it was an actual bank account. They had it permanently. They could take it with them. They use it in the summer. Anywhere they go, they get a real debit card, checkbook, and all those things. So their idea and thought was they wanted to open an actual branch, hire students as interns to work in the branch. They would basically be interns and employees of Invista Credit Union. And then they send a branch manager to us every day to open and run the bank. So last week on October 15th, we cut the ribbon on the first actual, and I don't know of another high school in Kansas that actually has an actual branch of a bank operating within their school that's student run. So we're very excited about that and the opportunity for students to really get the actual banking experience. They go to Invista for training just as if they were an employee of Invista Credit Union. Currently, we have 5 students working as interns.
With that,
bank. It's open during lunch each day, Thursday or Tuesday through Friday.
thank you, Mr. Dick. With that cue up, I think there's a 1-minute clip, maybe a 30-second clip, if that still comes up.
The bank is open for business in Topeka, but not where you'd expect. Topeka High School opened an Invista branch in their building called the Trojan Vault. The ribbon cutting ceremony took place today, and students are going to be able now to open accounts and use debit cards. And they even have student employees who are going to get experience doing bank work. It's an opportunity for students to get exposure in navigating a bank without having to leave campus.
I'm just so excited to see kids get the hands-on, real world experience day to day, just getting to explore something and have options that, support their learning in the classroom right now.
I'm glad that we have this opportunity because a lot of students don't get to learn about what happens or how to open an account.
The bank is open for students during their lunch break. Well,
So we are excited about that. I think the Department of Commerce or either the Treasurer Secretary attended along with other folks to really look at students who want to be accountants, bankers, students who want to go into business. And then across from that, they have several other businesses, coffee shops and things that young people have opened. But having the branch of the bank, which I think the Treasurer Secretary opened his account. I've never banked at Invista. I do now, because then they said, aren't you going to open an account, Dr. Anderson? So a student opened an account for me. We're excited about the pathways and the opportunities. Mr. Dick also oversees CTE, so he'll be sitting and listening in on some of the conversation today since he oversees all of our CTE. Thank you, Mr. Dick, and we appreciate what you're doing for students.
That's cool.
Thank you. Really interesting project. Are there any other introductions? If not, chair report, not really a report, just to thank you. At the last meeting, we established a task force to take a look at CTE. And we've had 2 very productive meetings, and I want to thank all the people that participated in those. We came to some consensus and have a recommendation for the whole board today. And I appreciate the people on that, the time on that. Are there any reports from other TEA members?
Yeah, I had the opportunity to attend the Workforce Innovation Conference in Salina. And that was September 30th and October 1st. And the theme of the conference was Forging the Future, Workforce Transformation Through Partnerships, and a real emphasis in the different workshops and speakers on partnerships and collaborating. And certainly wanted to thank Mike Bean for his leadership on the conference. Is well attended and well done. The part that I really enjoyed was the speaker and the workshop about successful re-entering for justice-involved youth. For youth that in the facility here in Topeka that have the opportunity to learn skills, earn certifications, and some real life, how to live your life outside of the walls or the facility. It was interesting that even the presenter that works within the facility really focused on, he was somewhat new in his position, but took the approach, I can't do this alone. I've got to have an understanding and a relationship with the correction personnel, educators, and employers. And so it was good to hear that message once again, how critical those partnerships are in trying to help reshape some of the lives of these young people as they leave the facility. And I do want to say thank you to Scott Smathers and Washburn Tech for their work inside that facility. And it is definitely one that changes lives. I had an opportunity to mentor a young man that came out of the facility a couple of years ago, and he'd earned not only a number of certifications, but he'd earned quite a bit of money while he was inside that facility, and left with a job immediately in Wichita with EB Construction. Got started at a higher hourly rate than they normally do because of what he experienced and what his successes inside the facility. So it's another example of how important, one, partnerships and collaboration is in helping to change lives, save some lives, and create new lives as they exit the facility. Also, I want to congratulate Tobe Wood and Ben Shears. They were presenters at this conference. And again, a lot of focus on how do we reach out to our business and industry partners in an effort for all of us to make a difference in a young person's life. So congratulations, Mike.
Appreciate the kind comments, Ray, but I'd be remorsed if I didn't include April. April helped plan a lot of that, and the workforce division at KBOR financially supports also. So everything that went well is due to me, and everything that went south is due to April.
Well, I didn't want to mention that she did say she did most of the work.
Any other reports from TEA members? If not, I'll turn to Vice President White.
Thank you. And I'm, as a former Trojan, happy to hear about the bank. Which side of the gym is it on? Okay, I know those hallways well. So, on September 16th, we welcomed a new president to Pittsburgh State University, Dr. Thomas Newsom. And as Ray mentioned, we held our annual workforce conference. We had over 200 attendees at the conference. So that's a decent conference. On October 6th through the 8th, I attended the Complete College America Policy Academy, where we are working on strengthening our policies and data collections to determine is math pathways and remedial education working, the new way of doing things. So that is one thing we worked with our academic affairs unit, as well as 10 faculty members from across the state went. On October 10th, the Kansas Core Outcome Group met and reviewed over 20 current system-wide transfer courses. They also developed 7 new ones. So we do want to thank Seward County Community College President Bennett for hosting that event. We also held a first meeting of our internationally trained professionals meeting. So this is a project that we're working on. We have people who work and live here in Kansas who are legally here, who were professionally trained in other countries. We would like to get them upskilled to where they're working, matching their education that they do have from wherever that may be. We also had our first meeting of the 90-hour baccalaureate degree. That's going to be a little process this year, working on that with our academic affairs unit and obviously the colleges on how do we even wrap our heads around a 90-hour baccalaureate degree versus a traditional 120. A few reminders for the colleges. Excel and CTE fee data collection is due October 31st. I believe it closes then. Obviously, the federal government is still shut down. That has not caused us any disruption with adult ed and Perkins funding as of yet. We will keep you updated as we know anything, but right now we know nothing. So next week, I am headed to North Carolina to work on a rural talent development policy academy, again with our academic affairs unit and colleges. Dr. Karen Doherty is going from Flint Hills Technical College. And then I will start my tour of Western Kansas. So I will be hitting just about every Western Kansas schools, hopefully, in the first part of November, weather permitting. So let's stand for any questions.
I have some questions on the 90-hour baccalaureate, but I don't think I'm ready to ask them yet, but that's
We have lots of questions too.
there's lots of questions there, I think. All right, I recognize President Nugent from Cloud County, report on the community colleges. Welcome, Amber.
Good morning. Adjust this up a little bit. As both Ray and Vice President White mentioned, we had a lot across the community college sector attend the Workforce Innovation Conference there, and appreciate the work that went into that. I know the teams really appreciated all of the trainings and the conversation, and stuff on OCR that Tobias or Wood is always very, very helpful with and providing guidance to our teams. As April mentioned too, working on the Excel and CTE data to get that to Sharman at the end of next week. We're really thankful to be included, community colleges and technical colleges, I don't want to speak for them, but to be included as part of the task force for the 90-hour degree, our armpit we feel is valuable. And so we are thankful to be a part of that. Also really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of the Excel and CTE task force as well. Really proud of the work that we're doing. And though it is difficult being able to come to some common ground and some consensus there. For the community colleges in my report, I'm not going to read through everything, but it's been a really busy fall, and I've developed a schedule for the year for the community colleges for all 19 to get information to me on a monthly basis, but trying to align them with both the strategic plan for the Kansas Board of Regents, but also the goals of this body as the TEA. And so this month we're focusing on some affordability and access. And so if you go to the dashboard at KBOR, one of those metrics, several metrics for affordability, but one of them is student loan debt, which I think sometimes is looked under the microscope the most because it's kind of an easy and a hot topic at times. But really wanted to just highlight that in that data, it shows the average student loan for a Pell recipient or regular not Pell recipient for a regular excluding Parent Plus, but then on the right set Parent Plus loan. But you can see that we've worked really hard as a community college sector to keep that low, and 45% lower and 23.2% lower for the non-Pell recipient than the next. And everybody's different sectors, education costs can vary, but obviously much cheaper than the university route. So I mean, again, just showing the value of the community colleges and the two-year sector in general. And flowing on into the report, into those institutional highlights on affordability, that's really just examples of how we're able to keep that student loan debt at a low rate. And so there's several examples of various ways that the community colleges do that, from something as simple as OpenER, also working to remove the fees. And so a lot of our institutions have worked to waive fees or to cut those fee costs. The work of many foundations coming in to sort of help backfill the scholarships. A lot of our institutions, you can see, have continued to raise more and more money for foundations and for scholarships to make it as affordable as possible for our students on the front end. And then you can even see there's a few institutions that have specific programs for those students that may be 3/4 of the way through their associate's degree, but didn't quite finish, but they can come back and they'll get a number of credits, if it's 12 hours, that institution will pay for to help them become completers. And so just a lot of examples within the report of ways that all of the community colleges are working together to really focus on making higher education affordable and keeping that student loan debt average down. And then at the bottom of the report, we just kind of include our recent news among community colleges. And so those are just some different press releases that have gone out. You'll see more next month. I think there'll be a lot more next month because preemptively, I did a report for last month, even though it was just for approving the payments for the SB 155 and stuff. And so Charmin told me I was an overachiever. And so she said, if it's okay, I'll just hang on to this report for next month. I said, absolutely. So I'm receiving more press releases so I may have a little bit more next month, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak and highlight the community college work, but I would stand for any questions at this time. Thank you.
I do have one, and this is kind of a loaded question. I appreciate the college's work to make it more affordable and to lower the student loan debt. This kind of puts you on the spot. How do you make that up? I mean, you have a source of revenue, you lower it. Foundation, taxpayers, cutting people?
It's a combination of a lot of things. I think, one thing about, I don't want to speak for technical colleges, but for community colleges, I feel that we're able to do a lot with a little, and we're kind of used to maybe being the underdog as far as feeling like, we don't have a plethora of funds. I think we've all really focused a lot on our foundations and growing our foundations, and being able to tell our story better. Because we do have so many graduates out there. If you looked at the headcount, if it's over 95,000 students enrolled in community colleges, I always say when I meet someone from Cloud, we're everywhere. Former board of regent, Went Winter, his best friend went to Cloud. So there's a connection everywhere where someone has touched a community college. And so I think even though we may not have the alumni network of a K-State or a KU, I think we've still been able to tell our story well. We're very closely aligned with industry. And so we have a lot of those good partnerships while they're being in money. But I know for us at Cloud, just speaking for Cloud, our foundation has almost doubled the amount of scholarships that they've given from 5 years ago. And so we've really worked hard on the foundation aspect. Also, I think really working hard on the grants and things that we can get to really support our efforts. And so, and then where we're able to waive fees, we are, but we also really have great partnerships with our school districts as well. And if we find that there's some barriers for high school students, we really work with them to try to make sure that they're still able to enroll.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
President Nichols of Salina Area Tech, report for the technical colleges.
Thank you, everyone. I'm happy to be here to represent our colleagues in the technical colleges. Much like President Knutson, we have a lot of different examples along the way that how the technical colleges are meeting the goals of TEA and the Board of Regents. And I encourage you to read through those, but I'm not going to read through all of those for you. A couple of highlights that are really important for our sector. We've represented at the technical colleges a significant investment in Kansas residents, and the growth is showing over the last decade. So in your report, you'll see kind of where each of the colleges ranked in terms of what the state funding is, and that, of course, is only for resident students. But we've grown. We've shown significant growth in the prior 5-year decade, or 5 years of the decade. But in the last 5 years, we've also shown growth, even though there have been some challenges to enrollment. So our colleges are really investing in the programs that meet the needs of our communities. It is a statewide initiative with all of the technical colleges, but we, of course, focus on our regions and our service areas. Some special accolades and some particular highlights that I kind of want to bring forward. So from the affordability standpoint, Flint Hills Technical College, very thankful for the Rathke scholarships. That helps students pay for their tools. That's a critical need for them, so they were able to reach out through their foundation and make that connection. MATC and affordability, they have, again, reached a very high status with Wallet Hub, ranked number 2 in the country. There's over 650 two-year colleges that are ranked on, or I think they're all 2-year colleges. Fort Hays Northwest received a medical grant with a partnership with the University of Kansas to assist medical assistant students out in Western Kansas. So again, working and leveraging that partnership with the universities. The next area that I'm sure there may be more than just 2, but I know that in our report, Salina Tech, WSU Tech, no increases in tuition from last year. You can look in the data book, and there's actually a lot of colleges that have not increased tuition in a number of years to try and help that affordability. From an access standpoint, a lot of colleges are realizing that you need to look at your local market a little bit before they get to high school. So WSU Tech hosted over 1,500 middle school students over the summer. We didn't hit those numbers at our place, but we did have a great success with ours. And a lot of other colleges are using that as a launching point to get young people to understand they can make a great living in a technical field. A couple of places are growing. I know Washburn Tech, and I think somewhere down in the list, WSU Tech are growing. They're building new facilities to increase that access. We at Salina Tech, we launched a part-time program for nursing. Our practical nursing students, typically when we started, they have to go full-time. Not everybody can go full-time, but if you want to make a difference in someone's life, you maybe have to meet them where they're at and provide that access. So it takes a little bit longer, but the students have access to that 15-month program. It can probably double their wage in a very short amount of time. Fort Hays Northwest providing institutional scholarships for rural Kansans. Manhattan Tech is partnering with Wamego, the community, Fort Riley, the Flint Hills Community Accelerator, and a lot of school districts in their area, reaching out, trying to meet those needs for accessibility. And then Flint Hills Technical College. And I think if you read later, Washburn Tech expects to have their enrollment increase. But in particular, Flint Hills is working with their Adult Ed Center, have record enrollment there. Some special accolades from our members. Washburn Tech received a significant donation. They are honoring the Bruce and Teresa McPherson family with their naming of their, used to be the Huntoon campus, and now it's the Bruce and Teresa McPherson campus for Washburn Tech. And I'm not sure if you heard it, but Sherry Utash was featured on The Way I Heard It with Mike Rowe, so a podcast there. Very proud of that relationship and that leadership from Sherry, and the technical colleges are really proud of what we do to serve our communities. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
No questions? Okay, thank you, Greg.
Not a question, but a comment, and whether you standards said it doesn't matter. Just again, acknowledgement of the affordability piece. That's huge. I know for us, we're at 78% free lunch as a school district. I know many districts fall in that space. Particularly, as the first report, Dr. Knudsen shared the various scholarships, some of whom Allen County is one of them, for current high school students, for post-secondary students, offering full rides for these classes is truly increasing the amount of coursework students are taking in high school. And causing them to continue through Allen. And we know that firsthand, but we know that's the case for many of these schools. So thank you for that leadership. Similarly, as you've mentioned, and the report speaks for itself, I can certainly speak to Dean Smathers and Washburn Tech, and I'm sure all of y'all noticed, they started 2 programs to directly reduce the teacher shortage. I mean, that's pretty innovative. So the para program, we know the health services, he's been focused on that. But the para educator program, you have paras that have been doing it for 20, 30 years and are now able to to get coursework towards in education towards teaching because of the leadership of Dean Smathers. And again, many other universities are doing that. So just thank you for your leadership, both of you, and for those others that are in the room. It makes a big difference in creating opportunity for students who wouldn't otherwise have it.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, there is no consent agenda this month, so we'll just move on to the discussion agenda. And I'd like to welcome and call on Barbara MacArthur, Director of Kansas Nursing Workforce Center, to give us an update on the annual nursing report. Barbara.
Thank you very much. I am delighted to be here. You had just heard my name and my position. I want you to know that I'm a nurse. I'm a grateful product of the Board of Regents Education in the state of Kansas, and I'm very grateful to be here today to give you a report on what's going on with the Kansas Nursing Workforce Center. Tiny bit of information. We are 2 years and 2 months old. We were the 41st Nursing Workforce Center in the country. And there are now 48. I can't tell you about Maine and New Hampshire, but we're there. I'm often asked, why were we the 41st in the country? And my answer is always all things in time. And we had the benefit of 40 nursing workforce centers in the country to help gather our approaches and make our decisions for the state of Kansas. So I'm delighted to be here, and I'll give you a quick report and ask for questions. We published in 24, exact September of 24, we published our first report on the state of nursing in Kansas. And this was the first time, it was a proof of concept, because here we are as a nursing workforce center, and what does that mean? So our report in 24 was the first comprehensive report on the state of nursing in Kansas. I will tell you that the ability to publish a 24 report and a 25 report was due to people in this room. It was collaborative. The bulk of all of our data sits in the public domain and sits through reliable, large national surveys that we could then access and pull information directly about Kansas and nursing in Kansas and compare it ourselves to our counties, our communities, and the country. So the 24 report was a snapshot in time, and it was a picture of the data in 22, because that was all the data we could get because of COVID. There was such a lag in data. The State of Nursing Volume 2 that you have in front of you for 2025 is 10 years of data. So big difference between the last report. That's not just a yearly update. This gives the opportunity to see patterns and trending opportunities, both statistical and economic, and certainly educational and employment. So you will find key findings in the report. And when we pick the key findings, those are not subjective, they are objective key findings from the data that you will see represented. So when we find the key findings, we share those with those who have contributed, such as the Department of Labor, the Department of Commerce, the Board of Regents, and so forth. So it's collaborative data. And then we collate them with nursing scientists and data and analytics scientists and present them in ways. What we say is that we measure what matters so that the decision makers can make the good decisions. So here were key findings that I bring you today. The number of RNs and LPNs licensed in Kansas are down in the last 5 years. Please understand that the number of licenses are those who get their licenses in Kansas and receive their licenses in the mail. So sometimes there's debate about, do we have more than we need? Do we have a shortage? Where's the shortage? And so forth. So because of the collaboration in this room, we can take information and find out not only where people are receiving their licenses, but where they're actually working in their communities, in their counties, and in their regions. And when we talk about nursing and when we analyze nursing and present it, this is nursing at every level. So these are nurses that may be on their way to nursing and are certified nursing assistants. They are LPNs that were mentioned earlier, RNs educated both at the ADN and BSN levels and all the way to advanced practice and faculty. So we use nurses across the board. So we're always concerned about availability and supply. And you can count and see that numbers are down. But what's more important than the raw number is the impact that nursing has on the health and outcomes for the citizens of Kansas. Our mission statement says that every Kansan should have access wherever and whatever they need from nursing across our state. So it's not just the raw number, it's a ratio of nurses to citizens, to the folks that they're taking care of. And it's not just because we're all glad to be there. We use the public health definitions of health. So those are things like mortality, morbidity, infant mortality, maternal deaths within a year of delivery, cardiovascular disease, stroke, heart attack, and cancer. So those are public health that we know that the more nurses that you have per population, the better those definitions and outcomes are. So the availability has not grown in 10 years for LPNs available to care for Kansas. I mention that specifically because LPNs provide a great deal of care for our elder and long-term care folks in our communities. The supply is, this pie chart's kind of self-explanatory, that almost 25% of RNs and LPNs in Kansas have reported that they are planning to retire or leave nursing in the next 5 years. And with the exception of me, and I'm sure many in this room, Kansas RNs are aging. So 25% are going to retire, the nurses are aging, and the population in Kansas is aging. So the desires and needs for care are misaligned with what we're seeing here. So we are action-oriented. What I'm going to tell you now has to do with activities that are specifically underway. And the ability to be underway is because we have the collaborations that are going on, the support of the Board of Regents, and we are grateful to be located, embedded in the School of Nursing and the Medical Center at KU, but our commitment is across the entire state. So there's a pipeline that everybody in this room understands from their vantage point. There are individuals that are considering nursing and they think about it, but they have to make a decision. They have to make a decision on how and when and where and the resources that they have. And the decisions are greatly young people that are thinking about their futures. We also know that there are any number of second career or second degree folks that have raised their families and are thinking about what might come next. So they need to make the decision about pursuing nursing, and then they need to apply. So let's talk a little bit about the decision part. So to make that decision, there are all sorts of ideas, job fairs, workforce opportunities, and so forth. We wanted to find out what helps and what hinders the decision for particularly young people to decide to pursue healthcare and or nursing. So when you're thinking about those kinds of questions, what do? You ask those that are making those decisions. So we've established a very, and when I say we, please understand that's the Kansas Nursing Workforce Center with your support. We have made an alignment with HOSA, which was Health Occupation Students Association and Healthcare Professionals. It's national. They're beautifully organized. There are 300,000 members in the country. There are just short of 2,000 14 to 18-year-olds who have self-identified in the state of Kansas that they're interested in healthcare. It may be nursing, it may be respiratory therapy, physical therapy, veterinary technical, or neurosurgeons. But these 14 to 18-year-olds self-identify. They're organized into chapters that are supported in their communities, many times in the schools and by their science teachers. They have two big meetings a year. The meeting next week is in Manhattan. There are 1,093 high school students that will be there. That's like just short of a nuclear power plant. And we have met with them. We've done focus groups with them. We did a survey of 1,700 of them last year. So we've met in person and we've surveyed them. It's for them to tell us what either helps or hinders their decision and where they get their information and what they need to make that decision. So one of the things that we have learned is that applying is almost overwhelming to them. They aren't sure of the many routes to be educated or certified. They don't know exactly where the programs are. And then in this state, every school of nursing requires a separate application to apply to nursing. So that's one of the things that we know will bridge to applications, because there's a pipeline. You apply, you get accepted, you get educated, you pass, you take your boards, and you go to work, and you take care of patients and families. Good jobs, clear trajectory. We had to figure out where in the pipeline to start. And we decided to start at the very beginning of the pipeline. You all are working on the educational part of it and the technical part of it. But if we don't get the applications, and these are the qualifications for the applications and the decisions lie with the schools. We're not touching the acceptance, but we know that applications need to go up to fill the pipeline. So our Apply AIM that is underway, thanks to the support of our grant from the Board of Regents, is to create a shared, simplified nursing school application process. So let me show you how this works. So centralized application processes are being done on 800 campuses across the country, and Kansas is right in the middle. At KU, for example, there are 30 programs that use a CAS, or centralized application process. Medicine has used it for years, pharmacy, PT, OT, engineering, administration, and so forth. One application that is shared It does not cost the schools anything. There's an application cost for the student. There are stipends available for students that might not be able to afford. But right now, if you apply to 4 schools of nursing, you need to upload your transcript, forward your transcript, have an application cost, and so forth. Plus, we don't have a way to know how many Kansas nurses are applying and going out of state, or how many out-of-state candidates might be interested in coming to nursing schools that have capacity in Kansas. This will help with that. So it's a best practice. It's been done for years for many other programs. We really think about the student. This is really a focus on the potential student. In healthcare, when we're providing care, we always want to think about what makes people decide to cross the threshold and choose you for care. And we always say it's ease of access for patients and families. So we took that concept and said, how will we get folks to apply and be interested in schools of nursing? Well, ease of access for them to apply and cross the threshold. So the students can apply to multiple schools. We can use the granted funds for the pilot that's underway through your support to waive student fees. And that bottom square, the students can see where their application is. Now, that's not shared across schools. It's shared with the school that they apply to. But the students can see where they are in the process rather than wake up every morning and have to think about going to check 4 schools to see where they've applied. So this is ease of access for the students. So those were key findings that brought us to the 3 aims that we have for our project. One is a centralized application process. 2 is a mechanism that the students and the decision makers, that would be parents, guidance counselors, family members, will be able to submit web-based, personalized, that says, here's where I live, here is what I'm dreaming about in terms of nursing. I only have 2 years. I only have this geographical area that I can go to. Here, and we will have a guide for them so they will be able to match the schools of nursing that they are looking for, have a centralized application process, and ideally, and we know this from other states, the application rates will go up, and we have any number of approved empty seats in schools of nursing across the state of Kansas. We want to fill those seats. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Any questions from TEA members? How much of the numbers going down relates to the numbers declining in K-12?
In K-12?
Yeah.
I don't know that we've actually looked at that. What we've done is just look at the applications. We haven't broken those down. One of the things that will help with the centralized application process is that then we will have a picture. Missouri had 1,400 students that used a CAS system, and Nebraska had. You get to find out where those applications are coming from and what the demographics are of those that are using it. We don't have that information now. We know that applications for nursing, for employment and so forth, and primarily baccalaureate, have gone up since COVID. But what we don't know is all the ones we're missing. Yes.
Thank you. One, there's some really good work being done in this, and it was needed, so thank you. Readiness levels of those who apply. How much have we been looking into that?
Readiness in terms of the
Academic.
qualified academically to go to those lie within each of the schools. And so the schools are approved by the State Board of Nursing, the curriculum and so on and so forth. So though we're
wouldn't have
not touching the grade point average that you're expecting or wanting for your program or your your acceptance process.
One of the things I wonder about if we need to look at the supports for students applying, because if we want, and we certainly need those, and I'm more in the rural area, and I certainly know where we're at with rural. We need to also be supporting readiness levels. There are students that want to participate and want to apply and cannot be successful because they're not ready. And so we as a body in the state, for whatever reason they're not ready, we've got to align what we're doing with where our students are coming from, in my opinion. And we've got to figure out how we make them how we help them be successful if they choose that.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Okay.
We have thought about and talked about, and we're looking across the country at STEM for nursing, for example, because STEM is math and engineering and so forth. Is there STEM for nursing? HOSA is helping us know from the students themselves what worries them, what classes they can't pass, or their reading readiness, or their ability, to progress. So,
one more support that we need, in my opinion, is that if there's a population that would like to be able to get that kind of training and to get that support, but they can't get there without the supports for childcare or for housing, whatever supports. And so what we're trying to do to increase, just my observation, we're undercutting the ability of students to apply if we don't have the necessary supports from community, schools, and practices for them to be able to apply. And that's what I think we're also seeing is students dropping out or not continuing in higher ed, which exacerbates the problem of untrained individuals, especially, I just know, especially in rural areas, and there's not a lot of hope for opportunity. So
the reason why I nodded is because that was exactly one of the questions that we asked, not about the educational part, but about the employment part. And one of the things that we found is there's a huge, national board, there's a national organization of all the state boards of nursing across the country. They do this huge thousands of nurses survey. And they look at how many nurses are licensed, how many nurses are working. Emily Dirksen knows and helps us know that. And if they're not working, why not? So what we found last year, it's in 24's report, is that 85.4% of all the nurses in Kansas are employed. Now, we need to figure out where they're employed. Some of them are employed out of state and so forth. But what about the 15% that are not employed? And there's a standard data set where the nurses ask that. And the reasons are economics, burnout, so on and so forth. The number one reason for the 15% of nurses in the state of Kansas that are not employed had to do with caring for their family members, and it was far above the national level because that's who we are. And by family members, it was their elders or their children. So when the employers, because the employers have a vested interest in all of this, so as well as education. So when the employers then saw those data, they looked at their own employee base, they looked at their own percentage in their own county or their own community. Hayes Med made a decision about supporting childcare because they had a high level of contract nurses and out-of-state nurses, And they saw that percentage that are staying home with their families and made it an employer decision to help subsidize and provide childcare so that their nurses in the community could come to work. So that's a perfect example of use the information, the data, and can you put it to work? So thank you for that. Other questions?
Very briefly, my apologies, go right on ahead.
I don't know if this is more of a question or a comment or just kind of get your insight. So my daughter graduated in May. And in high school, she did the internship thing because she was going to be a nurse. Probably because since she was born, I said, you're going into healthcare. So that you don't have a choice. And the first day that she went, one of the nurses said, why do you want to be a nurse? Why? There's other jobs that are less stressful in healthcare, don't take as much education, and pay just as well. And so I was a little defeated about that. And then another one said that to her during her internship. So she actually changed and is going into respiratory therapy. So I was just I noticed that you have the feeling drained and burnout stats on here, which are quite high. So just your thoughts on that? Or
Well, I've had an entire lifetime in nursing, and it is stressful. I also think that nursing is a privilege. And I think part of it is our ability to communicate. And by privilege, I mean that people allow you close to you and your family at their most vulnerable times. Everybody has a story about wonderful nurses. We're always the most trusted profession year to year to year across the country, except for 11 when firefighters were. These are good jobs. I think that the messaging and the rhetoric about nursing can change. This is interesting. It's an anecdote. Do we have time for me to do this? When we asked the HOSA students, many of them take CNA courses in high school, and many of them, that's the best job for them before they go on with their education in their community. So they go to work in the long-term care facilities. And sometimes in the long-term care facilities, you don't have the leadership or the environment that makes it look like a great career coming your way. So on June 9th, this last year at Washburn, thank you, Scott, for letting us be there, we, for the first time, brought the certified long-term care administrators, certified by you all, and the nursing educators, the ADN and PN, CADNY and CAPNY. We brought the educators and the long-term nursing administrators together. They've never been in the same room together to talk about how educationally and experientially and as potential employers, we could merge the image of nursing in long-term care, because not everybody can be a NICU nurse or an ER nurse or whatever. And there are people that love taking care of grandmas and grandpas, but they haven't had the experience or the alignment from education to practice. So I think that the more we can do between education and practice, the better. When we asked the HOSA students where they're getting their information, our assumption was that they were getting it all from the internet, because they've got social media. They said to us their terms, their own words, were, we look at it, where do you get your vision of nurses and nursing? We look at it, but we don't trust it. That was out of the mouths of they're young. And we then said, no editorializing, tell us more. And they said, well, when we see a nurse and she's got perfect skin and eyelashes and a messy bun, we know that she's had image enhancement. When we see a nurse that's sobbing and leaning against the wall, he or she may have had a really bad day, but there's lighting and there's sound. So we want our information about nursing and nurses to come from those who are actually practicing. Medicine in Kansas has had externships for second-year medical students all over the state for decades, for many, many years. So they want to hear from real nurses doing the real thing, and they want to see that. And, you know, you can do image campaigns, and Johnson & Johnson does a great job with those. Or we can actually bring those experiences, use the employers, use the leaders, use the role models for the young people, and do that more intentionally.
And I tried to.
And you should
it's
have
a
them
very
call me.
versatile. Yeah, it's to me, a very versatile occupation.
It is. It's great.
You know, you don't have to be in the stressful environment. You know, there's so many different industries that you can go into and what have you. So.
And it may be that there are those that made a decision, it wasn't really the right decision for them. So rather than be on the defense, let's be on the offense and figure out how to, in an organized, realistic way, talk about, these are great jobs, they're great careers, and they can last you a lifetime. I was in a meeting in Wichita a few weeks ago, and we were talking about reentry into practice or second careers. And there was a woman in the middle of the room that said, "That's my story." And then she went like this because she had spoken out. I said, "Tell us your story." And she had worked as a secretary in a long-term care facility in her rural Kansas community for any number of years, got married, had her kids. And then she said she'd been in the environment, and what she really wanted to know about was the real care and the science of what they were doing. And she was in LPN school at 42.
Very briefly, I have a quick question. In the interest of time, I'll start
thank
with
you.
that question. But I will say how impactful that we all have the responsibility to uplift CTE, our community colleges, our two-year colleges, and what we're doing. In fact, in the report, the expanded program at Washburn Tech and the partnership with Stormont Vale is a whole nother piece where they're employing CNAs and patient care techs and investing in people when they're young. But we all have the power of the tongue to uplift the profession, all of us do, and a responsibility. Having said that, the economic impact is what I wanted to get to. This new one, kind of like the Common App application where students applying to four-year institutions, they can apply to hundreds of colleges at one time. That's really what you've done here. I presume there's a cost to apply. And presuming that there's a cost to apply, then that means you've also adjusted the economic impact, because previously a student would then be paying that cost multiple times to all of the nursing schools they want to go to. Instead, they now have one cost if there's a cost at that particular time. So you've also reduced the economic burden. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, there are a couple of economic aspects. One, we know that application fees and so forth are a revenue source for the schools. And we're sensitive to that. And part of the KBOR money that we have will be to offset the costs for those schools. I mean, they may have somebody that's been doing applications for years. So we know that there's an impact to the schools themselves. And the impact for the potential student, there is cost and there's a sliding scale. And there are also the opportunities for stipends, so that if they have an inability to do more than the $60 one-time fee to get started with the process, then the schools or the employers that are tied with the schools can help offset the really minimal cost for the student. And there's no direct cost to the schools for the platform and the information that they're getting.
Right, but that's a one cost compared to previously it was 4 or 5 or 10.
Not every
so-
school has an application fee.
Right.
Most do, but not all.
Thank you for that information. We appreciate it. And I just encourage you as you continue to invest and think about ways to invest in the young
Thank you.
people. We'll offer up Topeka Public Schools and Washburn Tech as we're always looking at being a place for innovation, to just pilot, to show possibility. So thank you for all that you've shared. Appreciate it.
Thank you all very much, and I
I
appreciate.
do have one more question, well, comments and then a question. This can also be used as a recruitment tool for the colleges. Obviously, the inverse could be true. If people are applying, they could go out of state to nursing schools. With the financial aid that we have for nursing programs, I highly doubt that that's going to happen. We have Promise Act, we have the Nursing Service Scholarship, we have the Nursing Education College Scholarship, the Department of KDHE and KDADS and the hospital administration reached out to us this week about going for a 5-year federal grant that would pay for nurses in rural areas for 5 years. So there's a lot of scholarship opportunities that I don't think students would give that up to leave the state, but we could attract people from outside who met your requirements, but they're on a waiting list. They can jump into your program.
Right.
Same with students inside the state, if they're on a wait list at Cloud, but Salina has an open spot and they meet their requirements, they can fill that empty spot. But my question is the nursing cast an outside vendor?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not housed with any one place here in Kansas?
No, no, and they're, they are not biased or recruiting, or they're simply the mechanism. And the other part that I didn't mention is not only will we provide a guide for nursing, there'll be the first report on the state of education in Kansas first quarter next year. But when they fill out the personal information, what they're looking for and so forth, they will have the opportunity to have a coach or a navigator, I'm not sure what word we'll use, so they can actually talk to someone and say, help me understand the difference between an LPN program and an LPN +1 program. Help me understand. And the economics are in that also. So there'll be a personal information source. It's hard to understand sometimes all the routes that you can take into this profession.
So who's paying for the membership to this, the access to that? Is that grant funded?
We don't know yet. The pilot is coming from you all. The pilot is the nursing initiative funds that Vera helped us put an application in and you all granted us. Now, one of the states, Connecticut, did something very similar to this. Now, Connecticut's smaller and has many fewer schools of nursing and so forth. But because there was value to the schools of nursing and to the employers, they provided either the individuals, they had people that weren't recruiting for their school or identified from their school, but were available to answer those questions. And then the employers got involved in helping that because these are good jobs and they need good nurses. So we don't know yet. But we'll bring the pilot back to you the next time you invite me, and I'll speak very concisely.
Thank you, Ms. Arthur. Very informative.
Thank you all.
Next, we have our very own Natalie Clark, Associate Director of Career Standards and Assessment Services at KSDE. We have a presentation on updates there.
Okay, well, thank you for letting me share today. I gave you several handouts that I'm going to refer to, and if you have questions, please do. But leading to our vision for Kansas, Kansas leads the world in the success of each student. The first thing I wanted to touch on is the Kansas School Improvement Model. In 24 and 25, this was the first full implementation year, so we're in the second iteration of KESA, the Kansas Education System Accreditation Process, known as KESA 2.0. So it's built on the school improvement model that utilizes 4 fundamentals. And those are structured literacy, standards alignment, balance assessment, and quality instruction. So the school improvement model emphasizes the use of high leverage actions done with coherence that allows districts and school systems to focus on these areas that they believe will have the greatest impact on their students. And KESA 2.0 annually accredits systems. So what I've shared with you today, I've given you each a Kansas Career Cluster Guidance Handbook for 26-27. So schools will begin applying for these November 15th, and it will end March 1st. And there is a QR code that has the digital links. The career ready practices were recently updated by Advanced CTE, and there's a link to each course competency. So if you're interested, you can click on the link and see each of the competencies for each of the courses that are listed within the guide. So as many of you know, there was a national modernization of the career clusters. It came out in October, so it's just been just over a year. So these are the 14 career clusters as named in the national model. All states are required to report based upon this national model. We were fortunate that a team of us here in Kansas, we were early adopters. So we were one of these 8 states that worked with Advanced CTE to learn to see what other states were doing, along with the other states that you see here. So we continued to work very intensely with Advanced CTE at the Department of Ed. We worked very closely with Department of Labor, Department of Commerce, and the Board of Regents. And these are the 13 career clusters that we came up with in Kansas. What they did nationally was they had all of the different careers or all the different SOC codes for the nation. And then we had the master list from the Department of Labor. And we said, what does the labor market in Kansas look like based upon the national model? So rather than the 14 career clusters that included the Arts AV cluster, we are moving forward with 13 career clusters in Kansas. We're using the namings as they do with the national model because that is how we'll be required to report. So thinking about why, thinking about increasing alignment to the economic and workforce data, improving the connections between education and workforce, and as educators, our responsibility to provide this information to families and students on occupations in Kansas that are high skill, high demand, and high wage. So we use a lot of these different terms. I'm just going to share what our model looks like. We like to introduce at the elementary level, what are those industries, that highest level category, major economic sectors that drive Kansas's workforce demands. Middle school level, we'd like for middle school students to know about the clusters. And at the high school level, the pathways. So we have SIP codes, classification of instructional program codes tied to each pathway that align with those high skill, high demand, high wage career areas. In some cases, we have strands, so like the construction strand, we'll have a architectural strand, and we'll have more of the building design strand. So that's what we mean about strands, if there's 2 specific ways you could go in that pathway. And these are just some of the terms we'll be talking about. What's different in the new model is that they have crosswalked all of the NAICS codes, or the North America Industry Classification System codes. So if you've ever helped your students write business plans, they have to choose what industry sector that they're part of. So for each of our pathways, and we'll show you, we have aligned the NAICS codes that in Kansas is trending with those particular sectors. So if you want to look in your handbook on page 8, with the industry model, these are the groupings that we came up with. In the middle, we talk a lot about employability skills and how can our students demonstrate those workplace skills, applied knowledge, and effective relationships. So we have 6 different industries, the first being health and human services. So within that is the healthcare and human services cluster, the public services industries, and within that, the education and public service and safety cluster. Media and technology, we used to think of it as information technology or IT. The new national name is digital technology. Design, production, and repair, that includes advanced manufacturing, construction, supply chain, and transportation. What's different about that is the engineering cluster is within the advanced manufacturing. Agriculture industry includes agriculture and the new energy and natural resources cluster. Business industry includes financial services, management and entrepreneurship. There's a change there where you used to think of it more as business administration, but they changed it to highlight the entrepreneurship since 99% of the companies in the US are small businesses. They wanted to make sure students had awareness of entrepreneurship, marketing and sales, and hospitality events and tourism. So those are the clusters. You might have noticed that there were cluster groupings. So if we talk about our students with our students in grades 4th through 8th grade, what do they enjoy doing? What are they good at? What problems might they want to solve? So we broke it up. How do they like caring for communities? Do they like building and moving, cultivating resources with ag, investing in the future with finance, or creating and experiencing with hospitality and tourism? So if you're interested, we did this with our teachers. We recently went around the state and stopped at 6 different places, and we had them take an interest survey. What do you like doing? What problems do you want to solve? So these are career interest inventories that after you complete them, you can see which cluster that you most identify with. So this, if you look at page 9, this is what we sometimes think of our middle school model, but it's our clusters. So these represent the 13 clusters that we talked about in Kansas. And these are the industry sector profiles that go along with those clusters. Advanced CTE created these. These are really helpful. They talk about clusters. They talk about subclusters, which are really the equivalent of our pathways. So these are really helpful also. They show the labor data at the national level, but give a little bit more information for educators. So I'm just going to go through briefly, thinking about the agriculture industry, agriculture cluster. These are the pathways within the cluster. And then we added the NAICS codes. So we had all the crosswalk. We had the SIP-SOC crosswalk, and then we added the NAICS codes, thinking about reaching out so that the Department of Commerce, we could talk to them more and we see what are those industries, those key industries in Kansas, so we could identify those with the pathways. And what's new is the energy and natural resources cluster that includes the energy pathway that was with engineering and the natural resources and environmental sustainability that was with our agriculture pathway. So thinking about the need for energy nationally and in Kansas. And these are the NAICS codes that are associated with those particular pathways and cluster. So in business, we have 3 clusters, and within each of those clusters, we have 1 pathway. So business management and entrepreneurship, business finance and marketing. And I put down at the bottom, if you're interested in learning more about what that looks like. For example, it says pages 24 through 28. That'll show you the models of the different pathways. And these are the NAICS codes that are associated with those particular pathways. So if we think about the professional, scientific, and technical services and how the modernized Kansas framework aligns with the clusters, which supports that economic and labor demand analysis. Hospitality, events, and tourism. We have restaurant and event management and travel and tourism. Advanced manufacturing, this is a little bit of a change. It does include engineering within it, and we have 4 pathways: automation engineering, aviation production, engineering and applied math, and manufacturing. And the SIP codes within those. Excuse me, NAICS codes. Construction and design. Within supply chain and transportation, we have aviation maintenance and vehicle maintenance and repair, formerly called mobile equipment maintenance, and the NAICS codes associated with those pathways and cluster. Healthcare and human services, within those we have 3 pathways: biotechnology, health science, and family, community, and consumer services. Digital technology, formerly IT. We have 4 pathways within those. And public services. What's new is there's a new education cluster, and it brings the early childhood development and services underneath that cluster, along with teaching and training. And within public service, we have corrections, security, law enforcement, emergency and fire, and government and public admin. Any questions? That's as we go through. That's looking, if you want to know more, the cluster handbook pages are below. But we're really excited. We appreciate all the support we receive from Advanced CTE, learning what other states were doing, and a cross-agency collaboration. So we have a transition plan because the national model had not been updated for 2 decades. So we have a lot of alignment work to do, and we have a transition plan through the summer of 2028. So this is our priority list this year. This school year for changes for 27-28, we'll be looking at management and entrepreneurship. Our lead for that is from Textron Industries. They'll be helping us lead that particular piece. We'll be looking at advanced manufacturing. Garmin is our lead for that particular cluster review, and digital technology. We found a gap area in supply chain transportation. So we're going to look from the management and the entrepreneurship side, as well as supply chain and transportation. Textron is going to help us with that. We are able to use Lightcast too and see who's posting for jobs. So we're going to reach out to some of those businesses. So I know Emily is going to share a lot of the labor market information, but we truly, when we were looking at that, we used the labor market information to align our pathways. And they are going to report back out in the cluster pathway model that we just showed you. This is last year's poster. This is thinking about really helpful. What the nursing program, sometimes it's really difficult for students and families to understand. So anything that's on the posters, which are provided at no cost for schools if they ask for them, is right out of high school. Anything on this poster is high demand. If it's starred, it's high wage. So you can see if you get to the next, there's 3 occupations: payroll, timekeeping clerks, insurance sales agents, claims adjusters, examiners, and investigators that are high demand and high wage prior to that bachelor's degree. And they also have created today's occupations. And it's a really helpful resource. This is similar. That's the payroll and timekeeping clerk that's both high demand, high wage prior to that baccalaureate degree. What we heard, it's really important for students to understand the wage when you enter that particular occupation as well as when they're experienced. So this is helpful. And again, the insurance and sales agent, it's one of those occupations that is high demand, high wage prior to that baccalaureate degree. I just wanted to point out, and we'd point this out to our teachers, that the names of our clusters have already been updated in ONET and My Next Move. And those career cluster groupings, such as building and moving and creating experience, are also there. So it aligns with what our students and families are seeing when they go to do their career research. So there's investing in the future with financial services, connecting and supporting digital technology, management, marketing, and sales. And then ONET also, if you drop down the career clusters, they show the 14. I highlighted the labor market information in Kansas did not support us having the arts. It's more performing arts with the transition. But the other cluster namings, the 13 we have, do align with these. You'll also see those cluster groupings and those same phrases here. So the Board of Regents, Vera and April are very familiar with Perkins Performance Indicators. These have to be set as a state in our joint state plan, and these are what we report out each year. And I wanted to point out, since Perkins 5, the data 2021 up through 2024, 4-year graduation rate we report out on, the assessment scores concentrators. Those are students who have had 2 credits in a pathway. And we look at their post-program placement, their non-traditional concentration, and we can pick one high-quality pathway indicator. So at the secondary level, we pick how many concentrators earn at least one post-secondary credit during high school. So if you look at this, what this depicts is, and I'm going to go back here, the yellow, when I say CTE concentrators, we're comparing those concentrators, assessment scores, and metrics with all of the students in that same cohort who scored in those same levels 3 and 4, which are proficient. If we look at the graduation rates of CTE concentrators, you can see here CTE concentrators are in the blue compared to all students in Kansas. So we're very proud of that. We think that the opportunities for students to be able to continue learning about academics in the way that they're most passionate or interested in is really important. And we'd like to think that at least 10 percentage points seems to be pretty trending across the years so far from 21 through 2024. If we look at reading, the CTE concentrators proficiency in reading scores, that's scoring at levels 3 and 4 compared to all students in the state, is higher. If we look at academic proficiency in math, for the years since we transitioned to Perkins 5, the CTE concentrator scores in math are higher than the state scores of students who scored in levels 3 and 4. And in science, CTE concentrators in the blue and all students in Kansas scoring in levels 3 and 4 in the green. Students' right to know. This is something that we have been really thinking about. Echoed in our minds are, do families and students understand the opportunities that are presented to them in high school so that they can plan and have those opportunities? So what we've developed, and I've given you a copy of this, is a CTE resource guide. And there's digital links online that you can click through, but this is a tool for educators to use with families and students. And if you open up the guide, this is just one sample. When you're in the digital copy, you can click along the right and jump from the colors. We had students tell us they like to look at icons, so we're trying to infuse icons into our industries. And I think that is interesting, talking about the HOSA students, and we do appreciate that collaboration. This is the health industry. This particular booklet is the school year we're sitting in now, 25-26. The model that I just showed you for 26-27 is changing. So that's the difference between the two. We're in the process of updating the resource guide for 26-27 as soon as we finish our labor market information and sorting it in the new way. But this helps students understand the multiple entry and exit points in the health industry. So with a high school diploma, associates, bachelor's or higher. And then we go into the particular pathways, the coursework. We look at different occupations, credentials, certifications at the high school and post-secondary level. And then we link to the Excel and CTE page, tiered technical courses, degree stats, KTIP, Department of Labor, and HOSA. So the student organization that is tied to each of those pathways. So hopefully families and students we encourage in 7th through 12th grade will receive this information and be able to know what opportunities are available in high school. This is a health science pathway, and the booklet's set up like this for each pathway. So that is an update on our new model that we have been working on this last year. And I know that there's goals for the TEA, and we have had this collaboration. So we were asked about, we developed this plan to transition. So these are what we would like to work with going forward with the Board of Regents and the here in the agency. And we have been SOC to cluster alignment. We'd like to share our workbooks with you. because our transition plan going forward, we'd like to identify any discrepancy between our linkages. In some cases, there's several zip codes we can go through, but since the model hasn't changed in 2 decades, there's several updates that we'd like to make. And this is something each post-secondary institution, of course, has different certificates, associate's degrees, credentials. And sometimes it's hard for families and students to understand what opportunities are available. So we would really like to collaborate to have a comprehensive inventory of those short-term certificates, associates, and industry-recognized credentials offered that we could organize by zip code and pathway. And then we'd like to see if we could look at those each year. So we have a Perkins Reserve grant out now for our high schools, and we're encouraging them to look at the new model and reach out to their post-secondary institution and say, what is available at your institution? What's that first available? What should be that first goal that our students should strive for? Is it that short-term certificate, an industry-recognized credential, and associates? So that is something we have found that we really want to show them those multiple entry and exit points and show it to them early so they'll know what is accomplishable. And then we'd like to ask for you to review our resource guide. We have a lot of links to the Board of Regents, and we have in the past, but to help us make sure we're up to date. And if you have any questions, there's 2 other resources I've given. Thinking about providing information to parents, we put in how can individual plans of study support college and career readiness. We've been working with the Regional Education Laboratory Central on individual plan of study. If you turn to page 2, I'm just going to point out there's some medium-term outcomes. And we think if we provide information like we have just shown regarding CTE, if students are able to increase rigorous coursework, academic achievement, be able to demonstrate employability skills, and complete a CTE pathway, an industry-recognized credential, a high-quality work-based learning experience, college credits earned during high school, and graduate, those are all the research-based career readiness indicators that show a student will be most likely to have post-secondary success. So that's something we've been really working on. These are posted at the U.S. Department of Education's website, and it's what we've shared today. So that's all I have. If you have any questions.
Any questions from members? Natalie? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we have an update from Emily Dirksen, labor economist from the Kansas Department of Labor. Provide us an update on the new occupational employment demand report.
So today's presentation will provide an overview of our new occupational employment demand list. This data product replaces our old high demand list that many of you are probably familiar with, so we wanted to provide more information about this change. So the old high demand lists were originally created to answer the question, which jobs have the highest number of job openings in Kansas now, and which jobs will have the highest number of openings in the coming years. This has been a valuable resource for many data users. Students and job seekers can use the list to make informed decisions about their career paths, and the list can also be used to support education and workforce initiatives in the state. Previous versions of the list were based on 3 sources of data: current advertised jobs or online job postings, short-term projected openings, and long-term projected openings. Federal requirements have changed, so we're no longer able to produce our short-term projections for the state. And since the data sources are no longer available, we decided this would be a good time to review the high demand methodology and develop a new process for the 2025 list. So the new data product that we developed is the Occupational Employment Demand List, or OED. This methodology considers 2 measures of labor demand: high demand as well as emerging demand. High demand still answers the question of which jobs are expected to have the highest number of job openings, while emerging demand is a new measure that answers the question which jobs are expected to experience the most growth over the next 10 years.
The list also includes an indicator for occupations with high wages, so wages above the median or mean for their region. Before we look at the data from the new list, I wanted to provide some background information about the source data used in the new process. So we're able to access current job openings data from our web servicer, Geographic Solutions. They use a standardized job spidering process to extract content from job postings on the internet. These data elements are then used to assign an occupation code for each job opening. Note that this process is limited by the amount of information included on each job posting, so there are some job postings that don't have enough information to assign an occupational code. However, this data source pulls information from many different websites, including the Kansas Works website, so it still provides a lot of valuable information about current openings in the state. And you can see the variety of job sources included in the list on the right side of the slide. So the primary data source for the occupational employment demand list is occupational data from the Long-Term Employment Projections Program. The model used to produce occupational projections uses data from long-term industry projections for Kansas, occupational staffing patterns from the Kansas Wage Survey, as well as change factors, self-employed ratios, and separation rates. Projections data includes expected job openings by detailed occupation. Openings can occur due to numerical change or separations. Numeric change is the growth or decline in total employment for an occupation, and separations measure the number of workers who are projected to leave an occupation. Exits occur when workers leave the labor force entirely. So for example, that would include retirements. And then transfers occur when workers leave an occupation and find employment in a different occupation. So that could be something like a promotion. Total openings for each occupation are equal to the numerical change plus exits plus transfers. And the next few slides will highlight some of the differences with total openings for growing and declining occupations. This chart demonstrates the change in total employment for a growing occupation. Total employment is expected to increase, which means there will be job openings due to growth, which are shown in red, and job openings due to separations, which are shown in gold. For example, total employment for CNC tool programmers is expected to increase by 151 jobs from 2022 to 2032. This occupation is also expected to have 237 openings due to exits and 448 openings due to transfers. So if we add the openings for growth, exits, and transfers, we get 836 total openings over the 10-year projection period. Now, if we look at an example for a declining occupation, total employment is expected to decrease. So we'll only have job openings due to separations in this case. So those are again shown in gold. The overall decline is shown in red. For example, if we look at total employment for CNC tool operators, this is expected to decrease by 108 jobs from 2022 to 2032. The occupation is expected to have 721 openings due to exits and 1,362 due to transfers. The projected decline offsets some of the openings due to exits and transfers, so we expect 1,975 total openings for this occupation. Note that declining occupations can still have relatively high numbers of openings because of the need to replace workers as they leave the occupation. And our final data source is the Kansas Wage Survey, which is used in the production of occupational employment projections and to help determine which occupations qualify as high wage. The Wage Survey is a sample-based survey, and we ask employers to provide information about employment and wages for their establishment. We have 3 analysts who are focused on collecting this information, and they do a fantastic job of working with employers to make this process as easy as possible. Then they review all of the information provided and assign each job reported to the correct occupational code. The Wage Survey data provides annual and hourly estimates for most occupations, and data is available for a variety of geographies. Now that you're familiar with some of the source data, we can look at the new occupational employment demand list. I won't be able to cover all occupations in the presentation, but if you want to download the complete list, you can go to our website, click on the occupational employment demand in the top right of the screen, then download the Excel file to review statewide as well as regional lists. So this is what the statewide data table looks like when you open the Excel file. It includes the occupation code and title, indicator variables, wage data, and entry-level education and training information. We'll focus on these indicator variables for high demand, emerging demand, and high wage. So the high demand indicator highlights occupations in highest demand relative to all occupations, and it's based on annual total openings from the long-term projections program and advertised jobs data from Geographic Solutions. Each measure has a different range of data values, so we normalize the data set to prevent the measure with larger values from dominating the final results. And then the normalized values for each measure are combined to create a high demand score for each occupation. And that score is then used to rank all occupations. And then any occupation in the 70th percentile or higher are considered high demand. So for this list, there were about 250 occupations identified as high demand out of over 800. So the high demand indicator is similar to our old methodology. So you should use this variable if you have any processes established that utilize our old high demand lists. It's important to note that the new publication files include all occupations, not just high demand jobs. Because we include all occupations in the file, it makes it easier for students and job seekers to look for a specific occupation and see if it qualifies as high demand in Kansas. For example, maybe someone is interested in becoming a marine engineer. This occupation has a bright outlook nationally, but it's easy to see that this is at the end of the list for Kansas and doesn't qualify as high demand. So this is an indication that they may need to either move somewhere else to pursue this career, or they could consider other related occupations that are in high demand in Kansas, such as mechanical or aerospace engineering. And if you want to limit the list to just high demand, you can easily filter this column so it only displays true values. So here's an example of the top 15 high demand occupations. Similar to our old high demand lists, some of the occupations that are at the top of the list are jobs with lower wages and minimal barriers to entry. Many of these occupations typically require a high school diploma or less and short-term on-the-job training. There are 2 high demand occupations in the top 15 that are high demand, high wage, and those are registered nurses and truck drivers. So next, looking at emerging demand, this highlights occupations that are expected to experience the most growth over the next 10 years. This indicator is based on annual numeric change, or the number of job openings due to growth, and average annual growth rates from the long-term projections program. We also normalize these data values, then combine them to create an emerging demand score for each occupation. An occupation qualifies as emerging demand if base employment is greater than or equal to 50, projected numeric change is greater than 0, and the emerging demand score is in the 70th percentile or higher. So this is a new variable for the 2025 list, and it allows us to highlight occupations that are growing in the state, even if they don't meet the definition of high demand yet. Sometimes there are occupations with high growth rates that don't qualify as high demand because they have relatively low employment, so they don't have enough total openings to qualify. For example, wind turbine service technicians or data scientists. High demand occupations can also qualify as emerging demand. For example, healthcare has a lot of openings and it's a fast-growing industry, so nurse practitioners and home health and personal care aides qualify as both high demand and emerging demand. So this is an example of the top 15 occupations if you filter for emerging demand. Remember that the list is sorted by the high demand score, so the occupations at the top are emerging demand but might not have the highest growth rates in the state. You'll need to download the complete list and filter for emerging demand, then scroll to the end of the list to review some of the occupations that are expected to have high growth rates but don't have enough openings to qualify as high demand yet. The high wage indicator highlights occupations with a median or mean wage greater than the median or mean for all occupations. And the only modifications we made for this part of the process are adding a comparison for mean wages. We can publish the mean wage for some occupations even when the median is suppressed, and that allowed us to include additional occupations in our analysis, particularly specialized healthcare jobs that often have wages much higher than the mean wage for all occupations. You can filter this variable for true to review all high wage occupations, or you can use multiple filters to look at a combination. You can look at high demand, high wage, emerging demand and high wage, or look at occupations that meet all three definitions. So here are the top 15 occupations when you filter for high wage. There are many similarities with the results for our old methodology. Registered nurses, truck drivers, and general and operations managers continue to be at the top of the list. You'll also notice that when we filter for high wage occupations, we tend to see higher education and training requirements. And we used to publish high demand, high wage as a separate data product, but we hope that combining this variable with the other demand indicators in one file helps simplify the information and provide a more complete picture of the Kansas labor market. And then finally, another useful way to use this list is to focus on data for different education or training categories. Since this is a meeting for technical education, I filtered the list for occupations that typically need a post-secondary non-degree award. Then I filtered for occupations that are either high demand or emerging demand, as well as high wage in the state. There are 7 occupations for this education category that meet all 3 definitions, with truck drivers, licensed practical and licensed vocational nurses, and automotive service technicians and mechanics at the top of the list. 2 qualify as high demand, high wage, and 6 qualify as emerging demand and high wage. Here are some additional resources if you want to learn more about the education and training definitions, occupational codes, or if you want to look up occupational codes related to a specific SIP program. And then I can answer any questions now. Here's our contact information if you think of anything later and want to reach out to us.
Any questions? So you can go to your website and you could filter for high demand,
Yes, so they're all
high wage,
they're in an
and
Excel.
emerging demand, all in one.
Yes, they're in an Excel file and they already have the filters on there, so you just need to go in and select what you want to look at.
And then you could add all of those plus
Yes,
that don't require a bachelor's degree.
right.
I have it. If you would like me to send it to you, I have that. They have a statewide view, and then they also have each section of the state. And one of the first tabs tell you what section of the state your county, city falls into.
There's a tab with notes about all of the different measures and how they're calculated, and then one with a map so you can see how the regions are defined, and all of the regional lists are on their own tabs.
I'd just like to also plug our monthly newsletter. And so if you sign up for that, then you will be notified when things like this are published on our website.
Thank you. Very informative. Moving on, Excel CT Task Force recommendations. We have our Sherman Chambers here, Director of Workforce Development, to give us a report on that and a recommendation, I believe.
Good morning. I wanted to check my watch to see if it was still good morning. Since I am here, I just want to take a moment to also plug, because Emily's not usually here whenever I speak to you about things like KTIP and the high demand, high wage programs when we do program reviews and things like that. The changes that they have made over the years have been amazing. And she is so tired of me bothering her that she will proactively send me these lists for us to share, because we are so interested in all of this information. The change where they added high wage to the high demand occupations made our job when we're presenting that information to you much easier to quickly find. I am so excited to have the entire list of occupations all ranked together, because often you'll hear me talk about some of those occupations where they're sort of on the cusp of being high demand or high wage or what have you. Also, her and her team are instrumental in helping us create the qualifying credential list that we work on also with KSDE and Natalie's team every year. She goes through the high demand occupations. She identifies those that are at least 70% of the annual average wage, because that's one of our criteria for the Excel and CTE qualifying credentials list, and helps us actually get to a point where when we have those meetings, we can get through that very, very quickly. So I always plug that team, but since she's here, I want her to hear it firsthand as well, because what we present to you is often based in what we are getting from her and her team from the Department of Labor. So just a thank you from all of us. So Excel and CTE Task Force update, starting on page 26 of your agenda. You've got that issue paper. The task force was formed with members from the community and technical colleges to work directly with several TEA members, and those members are also listed on your issue paper. We met on October 7th and again on the 15th to discuss what we had discussed in August, and we're just going to jump right to it. So based on those discussions, we have 3 recommendations to bring before the full authority. We've suggested, I did want to mention here, we've suggested some next steps with each one of these. I would just emphasize that implementation processes, timelines, reporting, all of those things will have to be worked on as part of these recommendations. So the first one is regarding retakes and the funding eligibility. And the recommendation is that those courses retaken would not be receiving funding through Excel and CTE. One quick note, that was also discussed, I believe, September 3rd in the Education Funding Special Committee in the legislature. At this time, the K-12 0.5 funding is not generated on retakes. So something like this would also sort of align those 2 processes, just to mention that. All of our institutions obviously already have their own processes in place to address failed coursework and those challenges, but the task force is recommending to look at some greater system-wide consistency and looking at implementing something that looks a little bit more like that. And I would stand for questions. It might be easier to talk through these sort of one at a time. And if it would please the authority, it may also be a good idea to get consensus and perhaps vote on these one at a time to kind of bring clarity.
I'm okay with that. I don't know, do we have a motion for this first step, first recommendation?
Curtis moves.
I'll second.
This is moving second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Step 2.
Great, thank you. So the second discussion item was around placement measures and academic alignment. And quite simply put, that means we're wanting to make sure that there are some basic levels of math and reading specifically before students are entering these programs. And again, each institution also has their own processes in place. We would also recommend partnering with Academic Affairs because they've recently been working on those multiple measure initiatives. And I'd stand for questions on this one.
I move to approve item 2, placement measures and academic alignment.
Second by Humphries. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Great. All right. So the third one that the task force discussed is going to take a little bit longer to walk through. So looking at the funding prioritization based on the Promise Act eligibility. So what you have then starting on page 27 in your packet, what we thought would be useful to the group when we met on the 15th, and then this is the same thing that we're presenting here, is a breakdown of the current programs that are participating in the Promise Act funding, that scholarship. So you might recall that the Promise Act identified specific academic disciplines and career pathways that were specifically targeted by the legislature as economically important to the state of Kansas. So as you're looking through this, this is based on the current clusters that were originally identified in the legislation. There on page 27, we start with agriculture, food, and natural resources. And we see that all of those current programs, pardon me, that are in green, they are currently participating in the Promise Act. So the theory being in the recommendation that those program areas that are eligible in the Promise Act would also be what we would be targeting in Excel and CTE funding specifically. So when you look at the next page, on page 28, we've highlighted it a little bit differently there in the peach color because business management and administration is not one of the areas that was identified in the Promise Act scholarship eligibility. But these particular programs received an exception because of their relation to health science programs in the state. And health science, of course, is one of those areas of focus for Promise. So we go on then, the rest of page 28 is a lot of the healthcare. You'll see in page 29, we also have some exception programs. Again, human services was not identified in the Promise Act, but these two programs, due to their relation to education, received that exception and are currently participating. So we move on then to page 30, and at the very bottom, you will see some individual programs that are highlighted in yellow, and that list continues over to page 31. These particular programs will need some additional review, and that is part of the recommendation because they are currently programs offered in the state. They are in eligible areas for the Promise Scholarship, and they would need to be evaluated to determine if they are high demand or high wage or critical need, but they have the potential to be Promise eligible based first on that area of discipline that they're part of. And then the pink area. The pink area shows you first on the left-hand side there, we still have our clusters. These particular clusters that are all in red font were not identified as part of the Promise eligible programming for the scholarship. And we go through each one of those. These are current programs offered in those areas. And then so they would not be eligible for the Excel and CTE funding should the authority want to go forth with that recommendation to mirror what we're doing with Excel and CTE based on the Promise Act. And at the very bottom there, you have two programs that are currently not Promise Act eligible. They are in the eligible area of transportation, distribution, and logistics, but the programs are not high demand nor high wage. So they would also fit within this pink area. I would stop there. This is probably where we'll have the questions.
So I have some questions, comments, and clarifications as reflecting. So the funding prioritization strategy recommends removing opportunities for students in business clusters to take tuition-free courses through Excel and CTE. So that would include, I'm talking in management and entrepreneurship, financial services, and marketing. So these clusters include high skill, high demand, and high wage occupations in Kansas. And the NAICS codes align with the clusters, Kansas's key industries and sector development, or emerging industries for development. So another concern is if Excel and CTE tiered technical funded courses based on cluster and promise scholarship clusters are the same, there'd be no opportunity in secondary or post-secondary for students in some clusters to take college credit tuition free. Just going to add a few points. For the average student, dual enrollment status magnifies the positive impact of just one additional CTE course on initial college enrollment by a factor of 2. In the theory of change, the individual plan of study handout that I passed out, completing medium-term outcomes in high school or those career readiness indicators has been linked to post-high school outcomes such as college enrollment, employability in high-wage, high-need jobs. On the other handout, CTE dual enrollment students were 7 percentage points more likely to earn a post-secondary credential 6 years after high school, with the largest impacts for male students and economically disadvantaged students. So that is where I would have a concern, thinking if students have interest in any of those 3 business clusters, planting the seed and having them experience that so that they would be more likely to go on in their area of interest. And looking at just 2 different samples of the tiered technical courses, I just pulled up Highland Community College and Garden City Community College, Introduction to Business, Accounting 1, Accounting 2, Computerized Accounting, Human Resources, Financial Accounting, Principles of Management, Business Law, Marketing, Managerial Accounting. And that's opportunity now, and it's similar across institutions for students to be able to take tuition-free credits during high school in those business clusters. If we look at the Kansas Department of Commerce's website and we look at corporate and professional services in Kansas, it states Kansas has emerged as a leader for corporate and professional services, including those involved in finance and accounting. Thinking about the new model, we've been thinking a lot about emphasizing entrepreneurship because of the high number of small businesses in Kansas. One clarification we have, does the Promise Scholarship Review programs that represent occupations that are high skill and high demand and high wage?
We currently use high demand and high wage. The language is not high skill, it is critical need. There is not a very specific definition for that. We have provided in the past a variety of different data points that somebody might use to make that case alongside when we had to look at some of the programs that were moved previously from technical funding to non-technical funding. We provided those there, and those have been a discussion point for that. But high skill, no, there is not a definition that is part of that in the Promise Act.
So it is high demand and high wage, not high demand or high wage.
It is high demand or high wage.
Okay. Yep. So when we look at Excel and CTE, we look at high demand and high wage, or when we go through the process, or 70% of the.
For the qualifying credentials, for the qualifying credentials only, those must be part of an occupation that is high demand. The wages must be at least 70% of the state average. And then they also need to have the industry recognized certification that goes along with it.
Thank you. And I'm just asking clarifying questions because if we look at business management and administration, now called management and entrepreneurship, there's 11 occupation titles by SOC code, and they meet high demand and high wage both. And if we look at finance, there's 16 occupations by SOC code. 11 of the 16 are both. And marketing, 10 of the 17 are both high demand, high wage. Looking at last year's high wage of $45,250. So I just wanted to make the comment that if we look at the Kansas Chamber report, talent development in high school youth We ask them to present to us each year, encouraging our students to think about careers in management, marketing research, financial areas, management analysis, project management, accountant, human resources. About done, but some things we've done in Kansas, we have new graduation requirements. And each student is expected to get 2 or more. One of those is 9+ college hours. So our Perkins High Quality Indicator is college credits taken during high school. So if students who have interest in any of the business clusters want to take college credits, I mean, those tie together if they want to be a CTE scholar. That is one of the pieces of that. So just thinking about Perkins 5 and multiple entry and exit points and supporting up right out of high school, up through earning that industry recognized credential, up through that baccalaureate degree. Wanted to express our concern at the secondary level for the recommended changes for those areas that are high demand, high wage in the business clusters.
And I would appreciate those concerns, but we do have to remember there is a statute that defines a technical program. There's also a statute that defines what programs can be funded under Promise Act. And the legislature has decided that is not their focus.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Thank you. So when we discussed this in our committee, and I think I asked the question, but I'm not certain. The start of this was from Promise Act eligible programs. That was a concern that we brought forth early, was that we currently have Excel and CTE with technical courses or technical programs. So this narrowing to Promise Act eligible eliminates what you're talking about. In general, the technical colleges resisted that. However, to work forward from these and this list, we understood that and were willing to work forward with this list. We would reiterate that there is a difference between the Promise Act courses and the current Excel and CTE courses. And if we're looking to narrow what is available, if that's what the TA's objective is, we're supportive to look at it, to make sure we do a great job and providing you with our responses. But I think that's an important distinction that maybe I missed in the meetings, or maybe I wasn't able to elaborate on. If Excel and CTE in the future is only going to fund based on what the current Promise Act is, we think the technical colleges think that is not the correct approach to the broad spectrum of Excel and CTE. We don't mind narrowing within the Promise Act to make sure you're being efficient, but we think we should look at the broader scope of what is currently in Excel and CTE and make those same decisions.
I think kind of leaning into Greg, your comments and Natalie's, I think during our discussion, at least in the first meeting we had that I participated in, was, okay, well, we agree to narrow, but we also agree to evaluate these, I don't remember what there was, 20 to 30 additional zip codes to see if they fall into it. So it's not, I guess verbally it sounds like we're eliminating those, but there is an analysis to see if they truly are part of it. That was my understanding.
That's a good distinction, because I want to make sure that what I'm hearing now, I think I was with you, Member Bean, I thought we were looking at this to narrow down those Promise Act and identify those, but not necessarily eliminate the rest. But I could have been wrong.
I would just clarify that those specific SIPs and programs that would need that further analysis are the ones in yellow. So they are currently, and you're right, this started with, here's the Promise Act, here's the parameters and the framework of the Promise Act, and then how do all of our programs sort of fit into that currently? So those programs highlighted in yellow would have the potential to be Promise Act eligible because they are in the appropriate disciplines identified by the legislature. We would need to identify high demand or high wage for each one of those.
That's
That
what
may
I
clarify
remember.
it.
We were
Does
going to
that-
take a look at the ones in the
Does that
yellow.
help? Okay.
I just want to make sure I understand what you just said. The yellow group are not eligible for Promise, but you've looked at the entire list of Excel and CTE, and those would be ones that are high demand, high wage that could be. Am I hearing that correctly?
No, sir.
Okay.
The yellow programs are not participating in Promise right now, but if they are high demand or high wage, they could. They could because they are first and foremost in those identified discipline areas. So what we would need to do for the yellow ones, the reason that they're highlighted in yellow is because they give us pause and we need to do some additional work on them. They are eligible for Promise currently based on those disciplines. Whether or not they're high demand or high wage would then either move them to the green or move them to the pink, if you will.
So can you, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Charmin. Are there other, so the left column of this spreadsheet that on page 31, it says agriculture, food, natural resources is one of the categories that's Promise Act eligible.
Yes, sir.
This program on the top, agribusiness, is not a program that is Promise Act eligible
It is not
currently.
it is not currently a program participating. So we haven't had anyone say, we want to make agribusiness, SIP code
Wasn't there.
01.0102,
Okay.
Promise Act eligible. So we
That would be
have-
the college choices.
Yes.
Nobody chose that one.
Nobody said, hey, we want to bring this forward. So based on that discipline, it has that potential, should it be high demand or high wage or critical need as part of the Promise.
So this question is, what are some of the other categories, not agriculture, food, natural resources, or health sciences, or education and training? What are some of the categories that were not eligible for Promise Act that are currently Excel and CTE courses?
Those highlighted in pink, all of those pink programs, starting at the bottom of page 31. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the discipline. Arts, audio, video, technology, and communications was not a Promise Act discipline.
Okay.
Therefore, the SIP codes within that discipline would not be Promise Act eligible. And then
Everything that is currently Excel and CTE would be in one of those categories.
these are
on this
all
document.
currently technical programs, yes.
And that's what I wanted to clarify. That's what I thought I heard in our subcommittee meeting. So I'm a lot more comfortable with that because I'd been telling my people that's what we thought. So I'm a lot more comfortable with what you're going to consider and supportive of that. Because if you've looked at all of them and they're categorized now as they're Excel and CTE and green, they're already Promise Act eligible, great. The yellow and the purple or pink or whatever color that is.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that I've told our folks, that's the area that the TEA would have deeper scrutiny, most likely. I think everybody was pretty comfortable with the first part from our subcommittee. Thank you. I'm sorry for my confusion.
I don't want to put words in other members of the committee's mouth, but my understanding was many of us had concerns about the ones in the yellow and we wanted to take a closer look at those.
Yes.
And that's what I think we'll be doing.
So from my understanding, to make sure, so you're asking us, this number 3, to use the Promise Act Scholarship eligible program framework to prioritize Excel and CTE funding. That's what you're asking us to do, right? And that number 3, if we vote to approve that. And then on this list, what's in pink you're sharing is not eligible, therefore it would not gain any consideration Am I understanding that correctly?
You are
To be
understanding.
prioritized for any funding?
You are correct.
And I'll add that this is following the conversation. I emailed you guys, I think, an 8-hour meeting and kind of timestamped where they specifically mentioned these things that we're talking about. These programs that we're talking about was a concern for the task force looking at the funding for Excel and CTE.
Can I ask, I know I missed the last meeting. What causes the differences if they're both high demand, high wage? Why aren't they matching? Why aren't the CTEs, Excel CTE classes under the Promise Scholarship? Or you don't want them to be your?
Well, there are certain academic discipline or as Natalie was talking about the clusters, there are certain clusters that were identified in the Promise Act by the legislature as eligible for that particular funding. And then there, by virtue of doing so, there are also then areas, cluster, academic discipline, industry areas, if you will. There's a variety of terms that you might use there that were not identified as the priorities for the state in terms of the Promise Act
And what they
scholarship.
based theirs on?
What did they
Do you
base
know?
theirs on?
Yeah, the
You know,
areas that they wanted to cover.
Honestly, that I'm not exactly sure exactly what that, if that was based on high demand, high wage. I don't know exactly what that was. I think that there were probably a variety of discussions and they were looking at, ag is kind of an obvious one. We're in Kansas and that's always going to be the case. When you think about education, health sciences, law, public safety, and things like that, these are really, we talked about the community anchor institution and organizations. When we talked about extraordinary costs, those kind of fall in there. So, any given community can't really operate and function well without some of those things. We know that, transportation, manufacturing, some of these areas are, again, economically very strong in Kansas and some of our main focuses. So if I wasn't in the room, but if I had to guess, I think that they would probably, they were looking for ways to target areas that they felt were specifically impactful to the economy. Not to say that other areas are not, but these would be the areas that the greatest impact would reside in.
Is it my only kind of almost concern, just I know how legislative things sometimes, and they're like, here, you're gonna do this. So I don't know, it seems harder to pivot if you're tied to that, and to have them change would take, I'm sure, legislative change to add an industry, what have you, or so. I don't know. It seems like we'd have more if you weren't tying all the classes to Promise, or, and of course, clusters to emerging occupations, industries, what have you, like, then this group could make that change way easier than.
Well, and I think they looked at the different clusters, and again, they narrowed high wage, high demand, or critical need. So they looked at what's the biggest need for less than a baccalaureate degree, because that's another layer you have to add in there of what's in there. And I will also throw this in there because this is a landmine that is waiting out there that is going to come this year, regardless of if we like it or not. Courses within business. Some colleges have designated those general education. So we have a, what's that process called? A Gen Ed framework, where we have designed what is Gen Ed. And institutions are allowed to designate. As we've started looking, a lot of those courses, they have designated general education, which means we now have to change those to non-tiered courses, because that is a self-designation of this is general education, not technical. So that's coming right behind this.
Vice President White, I have a question, and my apologies, I'll just cede to everyone else and be a listener moving forward. But so is it possible with the number 3, as we're saying we're recommending just using the Promise Act scholarship, is there some value in giving this body some flexibility in language by saying, using that Promise Act scholarship for eligible programs, and, much like you have extenuating circumstances, and the high wage or high wage or high demand, I'm not sure what the language is at this moment, but some level of tweaking of language so that if you found that business, for example, that, or hospitality for that matter, but something that really leads to the sciences or something that leads and is connected in some way to the next item, that there is a good argument for funding from a college standpoint, and you think, really didn't see that connection, but yes, that is, where kids are getting their safe serve. I'm just thinking of kids in poverty, and I understand, we have to have some limitations, we have to cut. I mean, that's reality. But I wonder if this body just adds some level of small flexibility just in language that may or may not be used later, but it just gives that rather than tying it down. Is that of any value? And is that something that you think makes sense? I hold what you see in terms of bigger picture in high regard. So can you speak to that a bit?
That is completely your guys' decision. What we do know is the budget committee is going to meet in November. Is that when they start meeting? They have kind of already said in the task force their plan. So it might happen regardless of what we say. So right now we have a say before they meet. So that we would need some language before November.
So I really like that idea of thinking when we talk to our students about economic mobility and looking at high demand and high wage compared to high demand or high wage. I mean, we think of multiple entry and exit points, but having some flexibility in their interest area for high demand and high wage, thinking about CTE and the national model and, certainly business, finance, marketing, and some of the other hospitality and tourism are career and technical education. Perhaps not all of the courses, but there's opportunity now. I don't know how many of those might be gen ed, but saying there wouldn't be opportunity for any of those clusters, those 4 or 5 would be.
Well, I guess in the language that we do say, well, it's in the law, high wage, high demand, critical need. So somebody would have to argue critical need.
Well, some of those I would argue very well for rural areas as high need or critical need.
Well, the business ones,
So,
then fall back to, they're
So-
not even mentioned in the Promise Act.
but
So
I'm
that's-
just
that's
saying,
that problem.
and then my question, actually, I had a question on, when we left or when the last conversation, one of the questions was about grade level participation. What was the decision on that in the committee?
This body didn't want to pursue that.
Okay.
It would require.
Part of the
statute.
part of the reason you were going to say it's
Law.
required legislative change.
Okay, well then, my next follow-up question, what I find interesting is that we had we've had wonderful presentations today. And one of the things that was so obvious to me, or seems really obvious, is that we don't have much alignment between what's happening in K-12 with what we're proposing here with the K-12. What do you call that? What's your K-12 programs? Thank you, pathways. And I'm seeing a real systems level non-alignment, because they're at K-12, we're saying that's extremely important for students for some areas and careers, which I totally agreed for some of that. It may sound silly, but we have for the food, restaurant, whatever, or culinary, you have job postings everywhere, not just rural areas, but you can't get into McDonald's and have, there's absences of employees. So I don't know what critical need is, but,
I would agree with that. But what
my-
education is required?
Right.
And why should the state invest limited dollars in something that doesn't require?
well, then why are we giving limited dollars in the K-12.5 funding for some things that we're saying don't need it in post-secondary? That would be my
a
question.
Question for the
It
legislature.
looks at as alignment issue
If
in
if
spending.
I may.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
disagree with you, Member McCulca. I think that's kind of a point I'd like to make, as it even says it in SB 155. I think we need alignment across whether Promise Act, SB 155, it says each year, I'm reading it, as such time agreed by the Secretary of Labor, the President of the State Board of Regents, the Commissioner of Education, they'll provide the State Board of Regents the list of those occupations. And so I think that puts this body in a really difficult position and others to really try to go through that labor market data to decide what it is. And so I think it would be great to get some of that guidance at a higher level for us. I think the goal maybe of the task force, just at least for, I'll speak for maybe President Ruda and I on the task force, is just to kind of get some of that alignment. The Promise Act sort of helped. How do we align? I think what's difficult, and I'm not advocating one for way further, but looking at the other perspective, I think over time, it's what is a technical program? And I think business, unfortunately, is kind of not necessarily thought of as a technical program anymore. And may become non-tiered, you know, if you don't have an AAS degree tied to it, or if there's, you know, not a short-term credential, we have an AS now, we don't have an AAS anymore. And so I think looking at, not to say it's not in demand, but is it technical, or how do we align those things to include things? I think it's just a broader topic that I don't think we can necessarily solve in this conversation. But I think the committee itself or the task force was trying to work with what made the best sense and how do we align the Promise Act with Excel and CTE and make a sort of recommendation.
Business technology is not considered technical, the business technology.
Those programs are currently considered technical programs right now, yes. What we always have to do, and I know that the colleges are actually sometimes frustrated with me when they want to do a new program, is we have to start with the occupation and what is the level of education needed to hit the entry point for that occupation. Frankly, that's always changing. I mean, and we also saw actually a number of years ago where even registered nursing, technically, depending on where you are, moved to, we need a baccalaureate degree to be a registered nurse. Now, what we have done in the meantime is we've looked at job postings, and there's a significant number of job postings that are still posting for a registered nurse at the associate level degree. Part of the definition by statute again, for a technical program is that it prepares someone for those occupationally specific areas requiring less than a baccalaureate degree. What we're saying is that there's some shifts over time. And what we would also, I mean, and we can do this by zip code in the business administration areas, is to say, what are the jobs out there and what's the level of education needed specifically, to kind of back into, does that still fit the definition of a technical program? Some of you will recall that we did a 3-year review of KTIP data back in 2019, and we moved a number of programs from technical status to non-technical status at that time. And then things changed once again, and we've actually had 2 institutions in the meantime be approached by business and industry. They needed to start a program, and the specific occupation and that corresponding program, we had to actually petition the Program and Curriculum Committee to move that program back to technical status. That was mental health technician and precision ag. So what I'm saying there is just to say that this really all starts with the occupation for which we're training and what's that education level that's needed there And that's why we provide not only the data from our own internal DOL here in Kansas, but also the Lightcast data and so forth to give a fuller look at that.
And that makes sense. And I appreciate that. Just food for thought as decisions are made. And I'm thinking of business IT, I'm thinking of AI, thinking of our business pathway, the bank that opens. So that's just what's swirling in my mind in terms of impact to people. I'm thinking of the many school districts who are not nearly the size of Topeka or Diversity and don't have the Stormont Vales and all these other things in their space. And they really are, a lot of these young people are in, restaurant management. They're getting their safe serve license and all of that. So I just worry about when we have the opportunity to not limit ourselves, especially when we know someone else is going to limit us anyway. They're going to limit us anyway. Having the language that they'd like to see is most advantageous and makes sense. But is there, and I don't know what that tweak is, maybe ChatGPT can tell us, I'm not sure, what the one word is that just adds some level of flexibility. So if you find some rural district or, community that is impacted in a way that we did not intend, we have some flexibility. And just also just sharing, here are just some thoughts from this body, which is the responsibility. That's just my 2 cents of just worry. But I appreciate greatly this, and much of it makes, I agree with, but that one piece worries me just slightly with that locking us in. Thank you so much.
I agree with President Nochin's comments that it's going to, the motion, the way it's worded, will give the committee flexibility. And I think we'll be looking at more alignment between CTE and the Promise Act.
One thing I was just going to add about the Promise, the Promise Act is that it does allow for, based on our location, to choose a program that fits our local area that is a high need, and we are able to bring that forth. So that does give a little flexibility in being able to choose one, not saying that that's the right answer, but it does help with that. So if there's a way to align all of that.
So are you saying that we look at the recommendation and do some sort of tweak that gives us a little flexibility rather than, or are you saying that with what we're saying, all the purple or whatever you call it, pink, are out? That's my question on what you're mentioning there. My second question was, did we do an analysis of impact financially on what numbers 1 and 2 would result in and how much that would be? And then what pink number 3 option does? So we don't know what we're recommending. We don't know the amount of dollars or the amount of money that will be potentially impacted.
We have a report that we provided. I know that we provided it to the task group, but I thought I provided it to the full TEA. I may not have, on a current course failure rate, if you will. Overall, it's not specific to Excel and CTE. As I recall, it's not specific to students or what have you, but we're dealing with a failure rate of right around 10% at the state level. So if we think about Excel and CTE, roughly 50 million, 10%, that's how we would probably have to come at that. No, we don't have a current count of how many students failed a course and retook it. We also don't have a current count of how many students took a course and got a D and said, I want to take it for a better grade because when I'm doing this, I'm doing it for transcripted college credit. So this is going to affect me down the road. We don't have an exact count of that nor the dollar amount. No.
I'm specifically looking at that recommendation 3, because unless we figure out some flexibility, I'm not comfortable with that, especially if we don't know what the financials
Remember
are.
that we fund at the course level,
What?
not program level. So if you have an intro to accounting course in your auto tech program, it's getting funded. Because we fund at the course level.
Okay.
So wherever those courses show up, that's why it's hard to always give you guys a total when you ask that, If we just went and looked at those programs in pink and only pulled those courses, but tried to limit it to the students who have that as a major versus they're in lots of different programs, there's no way for us to figure it out.
We don't tie any of that to SOC or one of those.
They don't have to have a
codes.
major.
Okay,
So they just take courses.
but the
and-
courses are identified, so we can't do some analysis of the courses by SOC code.
One course could show up in 10 different programs, and how do you decipher?
Right. So that might, yeah.
I think there's an easy answer for one part of your question. The second one is the recommendation is to use multiple measures. That's not going to cost anything. Just want to throw that out there. I would agree that the first one has some cost for students, but it's not, I mean, if 90% or better are passing their course, you know, the retake amount, even if it's not funded under Excel and CTE, it's going to be funded under the other model if they're not eligible. Is a different conversation, but a portion of it. I think we're okay. I mean, from our side, I think the conversation that really stemmed this whole work group, this is a very large and growing program that we think the state is going to say, we're cutting you off. We're only going to fund X amount, whatever that is. So I think the reason the task force came together was to prioritize how the TEA would recommend to the Board of Regents how to distribute the amount of funds they have. So one aspect would be prioritize the green, the tan, try and figure out in the yellow what would work and what wouldn't work in a priority setting. And I agree. They're all funded based on course by course.
I don't want to be a pessimist, but I'm not sure what we're looking at may be enough. I hope it is.
Right. It may not.
This is Ryan Root, and I just, I was going to mention there, I think to Member McCulka's point there, I mean, just conservatively from the community college sector, we have taken a look at, trying to project what that impact would be, taking in each of these recommendations. So recommendation 1, 2, the pink programs being removed as part of what we are projecting conservatively would be around $12 million that would be realized in a difference as far as being cut from Excel and CTE costs. So, I think when this task force was was put together, the intent was to really try to stay ahead of things being done to us by the legislature and bringing forward some recommendations that brought down the overall cost of Excel and CTE. And so I think there's been some robust conversations and good work that has happened in bringing these recommendations forward. But I would agree, giving some latitude and some flexibility for the TEA to particularly look at those programs in yellow to determine what may need to remain being included or give some further review on that end, but supporting those in pink being removed in that overall number.
Thank you, Ryan.
So curiously, what does that do with the alignment process with K-12?
So looking at cosmetology, we have not had a cosmetology pathway in the past. So I'm looking at the report of 64.5% and the most commonly taken courses. Cosmetology is one of the most common. I don't see any business courses on the most common, I mean, as far as a large expense. So arts AV, more of the performing arts, we currently don't have that cluster. We don't have the cosmetology cluster. Human services is, how it is arranged here is a bit different. It's now health and human services and has more of the behavioral health and the community health piece. So looking at the differences and the change in the model, how it was and how it is now, and I appreciate all the work that has been done, because I know that what concerns me is we think about high wage or high demand, and we try to think about both high demand and high wage when we look at our pathways and talking to our students. And so that there's quite a few. There are in the finance, payroll and timekeeping clerks doesn't require a bachelor's degree. Marketing analysts. There's several that do not, that are high wage, high demand. There really are very few business courses, but they're basic business courses that allow those students opportunity. But I don't see them in the top 64.52% or even any mention of that.
Well, and that's what I come back to. In some ways, there's some pink areas, not all of them, but it hits in rural areas. Our K-12 may be their best shot at getting some business or some culinary or some cosmetology. And those are jobs that are available to low-income people if they make it through high school, that they may not make it to community colleges. There may not be one in there, but they're available to those individuals. You find a small rural area, you're going to find a hairdresser, okay? And you're going to find somebody cooking. Now, people may not say that takes technology, but I can tell you, my husband was great at science, and he understood spices and how to put things together and how to cook the dang things. I never got that. I think I'm a decent cook, but there's a science to cooking that's an art. And so whether it's technical or not, but I just look at several of these are where low-income students, low-income families that may not go to college, but if they get technical programs through K-12 and through us while they're in K-12, if we get some alignment, what's important, not just to cities, but to all students, I just see it as a greater advantage. I think there's some gender issues when we look at the purple area. I think there's rural issues, probably critical need issues. I just would like flexibility even for purple on there, at least in that part 3.
So something that I wrote down, I apologize.
We just can't solve all the alignment problems with this task force. And especially, if the legislature funds it all, as we have been, we can do it all. But chances are they're probably not. So we're trying to come up with priorities. Nobody's going to go across the street and volunteer to cut. We're going to wait until we're told, I assume.
I almost think this is two different conversations. You have the alignment conversation, which I think is happening, but then you have this Excel and CTE question. And the question really boils down is how much money is in the pot and how do we leverage that money to the best of our ability? And I get everybody's conversation, but I almost think these are two different topics, alignment and funding. Some will disagree, but.
Greg, one more comment?
So I think Member Bean kind of really nailed it on the head. If you prioritize nothing over something else, you have deprioritized the most important things on your list. Because what happens now, if there's only 80% of the funding available, everybody gets distributed the 80%, and you just have to deal with it institutionally where you're at. So doing nothing is still going to result in probably the most important things in the state being underfunded. So that's why I think the task force,
Or
lot of it this way.
entertain a motion.
I apologize. I just wanted to offer up one quick thing. When Dr. Anderson was talking, I wrote something down, and maybe it provides that opportunity that she was discussing, and that is the possibility of looking at an appeal process where someone could make their case to say, this particular program should continue to be Excel and CTE funded, and here's all of my rationale for that, for the authority to consider. We have that in other areas, whether or not a course is designated as tiered or non-tiered is actually based on legislation that we were provided. But we do have an appeal process where an institution can say, I think I want you to take another look at this for me.
Do we need to change the motion? What the recommendation is here gives the task force flexibility to do that, I think.
Okay.
My opinion.
Yeah, I guess I've just never felt that any institution didn't have an opportunity to appeal. So I don't know that we've ever denied an institution to come forward and plead their case with the evidence that they need to have in hand. So I don't know if we just, if that's a policy, but certainly it seems to be our practice. So I'm ready to make the motion. We accept the recommendation of number 3. And this will be a discussion, as Mike said, that's going to continue. And they do overlap at times. And we can't solve all of these issues, what ifs, here today. But what we can do is take action, move forward, and continue to assess and evaluate the processes and the programs as we move forward. I think, as you mentioned earlier, there are some programs that got moved off, and guess what? Things changed and they moved back on. So I see we have that flexibility already, and not just the flexibility, we have the procedure and the process to accept and listen to and make decisions on those that choose to appeal. So that's already our practice, in my opinion. So my motion is to accept as presented, recommendation number 3.
Do I have a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Yes.
Opposed.
I think motion passes.
What was the online?
I don't know if, Curtis, can you hear us? I think we're, and I don't know if Cindy's still on. Curtis, are you able to hear us?
Do we need to do a roll call? Who's reading the roll?
Dr. Anderson,
No.
Keith Humphrey, Curtis Sneeden. We'll come back to him. Mike Bean, Ray Frederick, Deborah McCulca,
No.
Todd Zimmer, Amber Schultz, or
Angela?
no? Cindy Hoover, she online? Not online anymore, okay. David Rice,
Yes.
Natalie Clark,
No.
Curtis, can you hear us? I think it's tiebreaker. Okay. We have 4 no's, 5 yeses, and Cindy not available, and Curtis we can't hear.
5 yes, 4 no.
Motion pass. Okay, final item, Vice President April Wright. April White posts for TEA goals. And you're standing between us and lunch.
Okay, so the committees met, both discussed different goals. What we did as staff was we went back, we looked at what's currently happening, what do we need to get done, and we developed goals out of those. We listened to what you said, but also what do we need to do? So the first one, we know we need to modernize, move to the new cluster framework. This might have impacts on the Promise Act. This is going to have impacts on KTIP reporting and how we label our programs or move our programs. So that's going to work with the alignment with K-12. Member Bean, you have been passionate about the military service. So what we did discuss is let's take a look at ourselves. What have we done? What is our data showing? Because right now the data is not great. So we need to determine, is that a mismatch between occupations and articulations? Is that a data error on behalf of institutions or us? So we want to look further into that and then from that decide which way to go. So that's at least a plan on where to go with that. Number 3, you are required to do per law as a body. You have to review new and existing programs. So that will restart. We did pause that due to the pandemic. We are past those years of the pandemic, so we should start that again. The 4th one, it's not trying to fix Excel and TTE fees anymore, but we do have colleges who have little to no fees. So we would like to hear from them. What's their best practices? How are they doing that? And share those out and see if we can replicate that or if there's something else we as a state body can do. The next one is tailored to the technical college. There is House Bill 2195, the Kansas Technical College Operating Grant. Within that, the TEA is specifically named as working with technical colleges on some goals. So we need to get that finished this year. The 6th one are the follow-up from the task force we just talked about. So there are some follow-up activities, coming up with a consistent withdrawal period or fail period, or coming up with some consistent language, working on placement scores, and finalize those additional programs that need review. So I kind of cherry picked that goal. And the 7th would be to diversify adult ed funding. As we know, that's a pretty unstable funding line right now. So let's look at ways, how would we do it if those federal dollars went away? I would stand for questions or edits. This is not what we heard from you all.
Any questions for Vice President White?
So we
You
need a
captured it well.
motion to approve the 25-26.
Motion by Member Bean to approve, second.
Second.
Second. Dr. Anderson, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, November 20th, and it's a virtual meeting, I believe. Any further business to bring forward TEA? I call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
It's robust debate.